My name is Suzanne Hart. This is Mindset Mastery. And our topic tonight is 3 reasons you need to install your GPS, your guiding principles for success, your GPS, that navigation system. Just like in a car, we all need one. So I want to ask you, have you ever been in a situation where you've been offered maybe an opportunity, you've been offered something that is going to move you forward, but there's just something about the offer that doesn't sit right. There's something stirring in you and you're like, I'm not sure this is something I want to do, I should do, as good as it looks. Or you've been asked to make a decision and the easy route, the easy decision may be easy and simple, but it doesn't feel good. And to do what you believe you should do is much harder. And there's a temptation to take the easy route. We're going to be talking about those situations tonight. So this is for you if you are stepping into leadership and you want to be a leader that's fair and equitable. This is for you if you want a system that helps you be consistent in your decision-making process. This is for you if you want to be guided by something bigger than your emotions and actually bigger than you. Right? Because this is why when things get challenging, oftentimes our emotions cloud our judgment and we make decisions that are easy in the moment, but may have many consequences in the long run. So this is what we're talking about. All right, so let's talk a little bit about this. And I want to start by sharing with you a situation or situations that have occurred for me. So I remember at one point in my career, I was doing very well. I was tracking and advancing at a quick pace. And I had great relationships with my bosses and things were going well. And then one day I was confronted with a situation that, as I said, didn't sit right. I saw what happened and the situation didn't sit well. The problem was, it was someone in a position to track my advancement, if you will. And so I was confronted with this issue. Now, this is how it landed for me. I knew that if I had done what I felt I needed to do, my possibilities for advancement may be compromised. However, if I didn't do what I thought I should do, I would lose the trust and the respect of my peers and the people I led. And so I was sitting in this place of what to do. Now, at this point, I'm also a parent with 3 boys, a mortgage, a husband, and my husband at the time had just started his business. And so my income was what it was kind of like the foundation for us as he was building his business. So this was a needed situation. I was struggling because it was like, what do you do? Right? And so for me, it was, I needed to sit and reflect. So I went home that night and I had to think it through. What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? And this is when I really began to see the power of my guiding principles. So let's talk about what are guiding principles and why you may need to install your own. So your guiding principles, your GPS, as I like to call it, is your guiding principles for success. These are beliefs and values that guide every decision you make. And for me, when things get challenging, things get cloudy, when my emotions get in the way, what I go back to are the principles and values that I established that actually guide my life. Now, I have my principles written. They sit on my desk right in front of me. They're actually, I've got one of my trusted journals. They're right in here. And what I do is whenever I'm struggling, I go and I check my decision against these 8 principles. So in this situation, when I was struggling, and I knew I had to make a decision, I flipped open the page of my journal at that point in time, and I started looking through my GPS. And one popped out of me, and it was integrity and treat people with the respect. In other words, treat people the way you want to be treated. And that kept jumping out at me, and it just kept jumping out at me. And I knew that if I did anything other than what I was called to do, that I would be compromising one of those principles. And so the next day I went into work and I spoke to the person who I thought had not treated someone the way they ought to be treated. The conversation was short, it was sweet, and as I walked away, I held my breath because I knew that either there was going to be no consequence at all, or there was possibly going to be a major consequence. So what happened was there was a major consequence, and I was actually let go. Thank you, Tria. Tria is saying this is so good, right? To know your principles. So I was actually let go. And for me, what it did was it was a shock to my system because I second guessed myself. I was like, what did I do? I knew this was going to happen. And I remember just being upset, tears. I talk about tears quite a bit. I noticed on my Facebook Live, there was tears, there was upset, there was a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety. But once I was able to just settle myself and have conversations with people who cared about me, what I began to realize, hi Virginia, what I began to realize was this really interesting thing, was that I was actually okay. And I was okay, not because I was financially okay, because I wasn't, not because things were fine because they didn't feel fine, but I was okay. And this is what I really want everyone listening to get. I was okay because I felt complete and whole. Because what I realized was if I had compromised one of the values that guided me and guided my life, it would be like I removed a part of my soul. I removed a part of who I know myself to be. And what I soon began to recognize was the more if I continued to do that, there would come a point where I would not be able to face the person I saw in the mirror, because the person looking back at me would not be someone I liked or someone I respected. So in the long run, in the short term, it was a difficult decision. In the long run, it was a decision that actually built my character. It gave me confidence in who I was. And what it did was, as I was faced with similar decisions in the future, I used the same principles that guided that decision to make subsequent decisions. Now, this is the interesting thing that happened for me, and I learned, and I didn't learn it in the moment, I learned it a few years later, was that people knew me for this thing called your character. And I've often said your character is the sum total of your habits expressed over time. And your habits are your habitual way of being. And what people began to tell me was I was consistent in my decision making, I was fair in my decision making, and I was equitable in my decision making. In other words, it didn't matter who was in front of me. Suzanne, didn't make decisions based on how I felt. I didn't make decisions based on whether I liked the person. I didn't make decisions based on what was easy. I made the decisions based on principles, beliefs, and values and expectations that guided me, but also that I let people who I worked with know guide me. So what happened was I showed up consistent. Now, one of the polls that I put in our Facebook group was I asked people, what are the fears that we worry about the most? And there are some universal fears, and there's a fear of poverty, there's a fear of criticism, there's a fear of poor health, there's a fear of loss of love and acceptance, there's a fear of old age, and there's a fear of death, right? And why that is so key is because oftentimes when we have to make a decision and we bump up against one of those fears, it is easy to have the emotion of that fear make the decision versus your higher self make the decision, right? Yourself that thinks things through and sits and sometimes in prayer and meditation and looks at the bigger picture, looks down the road, looks at the impact of the decision on other people. It's usually when we're in that place where we have anxiety about the loss, those things, loss of love, loss of income, so poverty, being criticized, that we tend to waffle. And so for me, what I saw was that when I activated my GPS, it bypassed those feelings. It wasn't like the feelings went away. It was that I knew what guided me. I knew what I needed to do in spite of what I wanted to do, in spite of what was easy, in spite of what would have me feel like I belonged, would give me a sense of security. Sometimes we just got to do what we believe is right in our soul versus what is easy. So I wanted to share that because, this year has been just the most interesting year, in many ways the most tumultuous year, and in other ways a very revealing year. And what we've seen revealed is the way of being of people. And really, I question, for many people, what is guiding them, and I wonder, what if do they know what values and beliefs guide them? Because I see decisions, I see comments, I see statements that are questionable, and I also see people's judgment shift and how they make decisions change depending on the circumstance or who's before us. And so what I really want to say is, it's really easy when they say when you see something, sometimes you need to say something. Well, in this day and age, with all that's going on, it's really easy to see something and say, I'm not going to say something because it has nothing to do with me. And part of the question I ask myself is, if I was sitting in the seat of whoever the person is that's not being treated well or whatever, would I want someone to say, I'm not going to say something because it has nothing to do with me? I would hope that my GPS, my guiding principles, the principles that guide me, would be bigger and kick in more than the fear of what I potentially was going to lose. And that's really the piece that I really wanted everyone to check in on. And so, how do you establish your guiding principles and how do you install them? Which was the question I put in there. How do you install your GPS? Well, for me, my GPS has not always been with me. It has not always been installed. And I realized that I had to go through making poor decisions. I had to go through making decisions that actually took a piece of me, if you will. So I made the decision and I didn't feel good after I made it. I had an experience that I participated in. And when I reflected, I didn't feel good for being part of something. I did things and then in hindsight said that took too much of me. And what I realized was that my emotions were guiding me. Now, remember, we're doing mindset mastery, and one of the areas of mastery is emotional mastery. And what I realized was my emotions were making the decision. So, in other words, fear, anxiety, doubt, shame, anger, blame were making the decisions rather than my higher self. So, what I had to do was I had to sit down and take a moment and actually go, what guides you? And so I'm going to ask everybody to kind of, if you can, put some values that guide you, right? So I had to take some time and sit and actually begin to write them. And so for those people who are part of my mastermind, right, one of the things is that I ask people to write 8 to 10 principles. They are values and beliefs that guide you no matter what's going on. And for many people, it's a moment of self-reflection. Many people realize that if they had these principles, oftentimes they wouldn't be in the relationships they're in, or they understand why a relationship is so frictional, right? So what they had to do was they were asked to write 8 principles to 10 principles, right? So for a few of mine is integrity. Integrity is my highest principle. Do what you say you're going to do. Um, Treat people the way you want to be treated. Be trustworthy. So that's one of mine. Open and honest and timely communication is another one of the principles that guide me. Creating an environment that is physically, emotionally, and spiritually healthy is one that guides me. Now they seem big, but when you're making big decisions and you lay that decision against the backdrop of these principles, it is amazing what will pop up at you. And what you'll realize is the reason you might be struggling, the reason the decision doesn't feel well, is that it's a decision that's out of alignment with who you're choosing to be in the world. And in that you may have to choose something different. Now, I want to talk about the what can I expect? How can I expect to use my GPS? It's a guide, right? But what happens if you don't use it? And this is really where the rubber kind of hits the road and where the real important work is. And I think what happens is I joke and I say, I take me everywhere. I take Suzanne and all her experiences everywhere. And so there's no escaping my conscious, there's no escaping my mind, there's no escaping my knowing who I am being in the world, as much as at times I don't want to look. And even if I don't look, it's there. But this is the thing that happens, is I may try to hide from myself, but it's hard to hide from myself. And what happens is subconsciously, I know who I'm being. And that knowing, when it's not in alignment with who I would like to be, how I want to see myself, it erodes and takes pieces away from you. And in time, this is when people are often challenged by how they're showing up. This is when people are walking with deep shame, deep blame, deep guilt, all these different things, because they're making decisions that's possibly easy in the moment, but the cost in the long run is way too high. So, I wanted to share this because we're going into the end of the year. And this is oftentimes where people begin to work on their goal settings. They begin to work on their vision. They begin to plan their year. And I'm a big one on, there's many ways to get from point A to point B. And so why I wanted to do this was to give people a backdrop to which to set their goals and build their plan. Because the journey to where you're going has to be one that is filled with integrity, with alignment of who you want to be in the world. Because the worst thing is to get somewhere, to achieve something, and have lost your soul, your self-respect, your self-esteem, and your self-worth along the journey, right? Each and every one of us wants to achieve our goals and arrive at the destination, if you will, intact, but not only intact, inspired by who we are, inspired by the journey, inspired by how we showed up, inspired by how we played the game. And so your GPS is what allows you to sit in that place where you make decisions that may be challenging in the moment, but when you look back, you'll be inspired by the courage you had. You'll be inspired by the integrity you displayed. You'd be inspired by your willingness to speak your voice, to take a stand, to make a risk that changed everything, but didn't take anything from your integrity, your internal self. That is why I wanted to really kind of begin to wrap the year with this principle. So the GPS, your guiding principles for success, is one of the mindset mastery principles. It's one of the 7 because it is foundational. And I recommend that each and every one of us check our decisions against this principle. So I want to just check and see what people are saying as as we have this conversation. Hi, Virginia. Virginia says brave, courageous, and powerful. Thank you. Great share. Onyx says hi. Awesome. Love it. Thank you. Tria reflected back, your character is a sum total of your habits expressed over time. Just some great shares. Let your conscience be your guide. That's a great saying, right? But it speaks volumes. People are saying they're gonna install their GPS. Absolutely. So this is what I wanna leave everyone with. I truly believe that we're probably in some of the most interesting times, and we're going to have another interesting year as things continue to shift and change, and as things continue to be unpredictable. And in unpredictable times, it tends to be emotional times. It tends to be times where we're faced with fear, we're faced with indecision, we're faced with hard decisions, we're faced with the possibility of loss, all those things. And as you step into the new year, don't step in not guided. Take some time and sit down and map out and install your GPS. Write down those 8 to 10 things that guide you. Go do some soul searching. Go do some searching. Engage in conversations. And really just write down, these are the things that are important to me. These are the things that have me feel full and whole and complete. And I want to make my decisions from this place where I not only do I decide, but after the decisions, I am whole and complete. All right. So this was the conversation for tonight. Thank you so much for joining. As you leave, I want you to know each and every one of us is so brilliant. Each and every one of us is so very special. And the world is working for you to step up and reveal your very special and unique gifts. And anything that happens to you is actually designed, I believe, to have you find another level of yourself, a bolder level of yourself, a new level of brilliance. So with that, my name is Suzanne Hart. This is Mindset Mastery, and I will see you not next Thursday, because happy Thanksgiving to my American friends, but I'll see you the first week in December. Blessings, take care, and I will talk to you soon.